He laughed, as his wife begged him not to leave, his wife on the floor begging, 3 sick babies screaming his name. But the man who walked out that day thought he'd won. He didn't know the woman he left to suffer would rise stronger, and he will soon stand before her powerless, as she whispered the 7 words that ended his world. Before we dive in, where are you watching from, and what kind of story do you want to see next? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in and don't let go, go ahead, hit subscribe. I have another powerful one coming tomorrow. Now, let's get into the story. The sound of 3 babies crying should never mix with the sound of a marriage ending. But that Tuesday afternoon in their Georgetown townhouse, Eliana Myers heard both at once. She stood in the living room, each arm cradling a screaming infant, the third pressed against her chest in a baby carrier. Her hair hadn't been washed in 4 days. Her eyes were swollen from sleepless nights in the NICU. The babies had only been home for 2 weeks, premature, fragile, fighting. And Elliot was packing. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Elliot, please don't do this." He didn't even look at her. Just kept folding his suits with sharp, angry precision. The expensive ones. The ones she'd ironed while pregnant, back when she still believed love could survive anything. "I'm done," he said coldly, snapping his suitcase shut. "I'm done pretending this is love." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" Her legs almost gave out. Baby Micah wailed louder, sensing her heartbeat spike. "What are you talking about? These are your children, Elliot. Your children." He finally turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was worse than anger. It was indifference. Cold, polished indifference. "My children." He laughed, actually laughed. "Look at this place, Eliana. Look at you. You're drowning. We're drowning. And I refuse to go down with this ship. They're 8 weeks old. They were born 2 months early. They need a mother who can function. And I need a life." She couldn't breathe. The room tilted. Somewhere in the chaos of crying babies and her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, she heard him pick up his keys. "The papers are on the kitchen table," he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. That tie. The navy one with silver threads. The one she'd given him for their anniversary. "Sign them. My lawyer will be in touch." "Elliot. I'm late for a meeting." He walked toward the door, shoes clicking on the hardwood floor they'd refinished together. Each step was a nail in a coffin she hadn't known she was building. "Who is she?" Eliana's voice came out stronger than she felt. Broken, but not shattered. "Not yet." He paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt? Shame? No. Annoyance. "Does it matter?" he said quietly. "This was over the moment you chose them over us." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut with the softest sound. Not a slam. Not dramatic. Just final. Eliana stood there, 3 crying babies in her arms, in a home that suddenly felt like a tomb. Her legs gave out. She sank to her knees carefully, protecting the infants even as her world collapsed around her. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table, next to an empty coffee mug and a medical bill for $73,000. She sobbed. Deep, guttural sobs that came from a place she didn't know existed. The kind of crying that breaks ribs and shatters souls. But somewhere between the 3rd and 4th sob, something shifted. Her daughter, little Aria, stopped crying, looked up at her with those impossibly blue eyes, and gripped her finger with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for someone so small. Eliana looked down at her 3 miracles. Born too early. Fighting too hard. Surviving against every odd. And she made a decision. If they could fight, so could she. But this wasn't the end. It was her beginning. 3 years before that devastating Tuesday, Eliana Myers believed in fairy tales. She was 24, fresh out of Georgetown with a degree in civil engineering and stars in her eyes. Elliot Anderson was 26, Harvard MBA, sharp suits, sharper ambition. They met at a networking mixer in Washington, D.C., the kind where young professionals pretend to care about policy while really just hunting for connections. He'd approached her near the bar, champagne in hand, smile devastating. "You look like someone who doesn't belong at these things," he'd said. "Neither do you," she'd replied, and that was it. The spark that would eventually burn her entire world down. They were magnetic together. Everyone said so. Eliana was the dreamer, sketching building designs on napkins, talking about sustainable infrastructure, about creating spaces where families could thrive. She wanted to build homes with soul, structures that meant something beyond profit margins. Elliot was different. He saw buildings as assets, investments, stepping stones to something greater. He worked in corporate development at Sterling Group, Lana Jones's empire of luxury real estate. He was hungry, restless, always calculating his next move. "You're too idealistic," he'd tell her over dinner in their cramped Adams Morgan apartment. "The world doesn't reward dreamers, Elle. It rewards winners." "Then I'll win by dreaming," she'd counter, kissing him, believing they could have both, love and success, passion and purpose. They got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. No big wedding. Elliot said they should save money for their future. For the townhouse they'd buy. For the life they'd build. She believed him. The pregnancy was a shock. They'd been trying, but not seriously. And then suddenly, triplets. 3 heartbeats on the ultrasound screen. 3 futures. 3 reasons to be terrified. "We can't afford this," Elliot had said, staring at the sonogram images. "We'll figure it out," Eliana had replied, hand on her growing belly. "People do this all the time." But they didn't figure it out. The babies came at 30 weeks. Emergency C-section. Micah, Arya, and Josiah, each weighing less than 4 pounds. Tiny warriors in plastic incubators, covered in wires and tubes and monitors that beeped through Eliana's nightmares. She practically lived at the hospital. Held their impossibly small hands through plastic gloves. Pumped milk every 3 hours. Read them stories they couldn't hear yet. Prayed to a god she wasn't sure believed in her anymore. Elliot visited once a week. Sometimes less. "I have to work," he'd say, checking his phone in the NICU waiting room. "Someone has to keep the insurance active. Someone has to think about the bills." But he wasn't thinking about bills. He was thinking about escape routes. She didn't see it then. Didn't see the late nights that became later. The business trips that seemed too frequent. The way he stopped touching her belly. The way he flinched when the babies cried. She was too busy fighting. Fighting for 3 lives that hung in the balance. Fighting with insurance companies. Fighting with exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning in shallow water. 67 days in the NICU. 67 days of machines and specialists and terrifying phrases like underdeveloped lungs and feeding tube, and we'll have to wait and see. When they finally came home, Eliana thought the worst was over. She had no idea it was just beginning. Elliot had changed. His patience was gone. His warmth, extinguished. He looked at his children like they were mistakes that needed correcting. Like they'd stolen something from him he could never get back. His freedom. His trajectory. His perfect, planned life. And while she fought for their lives, he fought to escape his own. Speech balloon: what would you do if someone walked out on you and 3 sick babies? Comment below, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. The first time Eliana smelled it, she told herself she was imagining things. It was a Thursday night, 3 months after the babies came home. Elliot walked through the door at 11:47 p.m. She knew because she'd been watching the clock since 9, feeding schedules and worry blurring together in her exhausted mind. "Late meeting," he muttered, loosening his tie without looking at her. She was on the couch, Arya finally asleep against her chest after an hour of inconsolable crying. The scent hit her as he walked past. Perfume. Not hers. She hadn't worn perfume since the 3rd trimester. The babies were too sensitive, their tiny systems too fragile for fragrances. This was expensive. Floral. Deliberate. Elliot. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "What?" He was already heading toward the bedroom, phone glowing in his hand. "Nothing. I just missed you today." He paused at the hallway entrance, silhouetted against the dim light. For a moment, she thought he might come back. Sit with her. Ask about the baby's doctor appointment. Ask about her. Instead, "You're always tired these days, Elle." The words hung in the air like poison. "I'm tired because I'm taking care of 3 infants alone," she said quietly, carefully, trying not to wake Arya. "I'm tired because you've worked late every night this week. I'm tired because you've changed." His tone was sharp now, accusatory. "You used to be fun. Spontaneous. Now you're just this." He gestured vaguely at her, at the spit-up stain on her shoulder, at her unwashed hair, at the dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could hide anymore. Something cracked inside her chest. These are your children, Elliot. I know whose children they are. His jaw tightened. I'm the one paying for them. He disappeared into the bedroom. The door didn't slam. That would have been easier somehow. Instead, it closed with a soft final click that made her heartbeat pound in her ears. She sat there in the darkness, Aria's tiny breaths against her collarbone, and listened. Listened to him shower, longer than usual. Listened to the buzz of his phone, constant, insistent. Listened to the sound of her own breathing getting faster, shallower. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. Each second a tiny detonation. Tick, tick, tick. Over the next 2 weeks, the signs multiplied like cancer cells. Lipstick on his collar. Just a smudge, barely visible, but there. She found it while sorting laundry at 2 a.m., Josiah screaming from the nursery, her hands shaking as she held the white dress shirt up to the light. Late nights became later. Client dinner. Strategy session. Networking event. Each excuse delivered with decreasing effort, like he'd stopped caring whether she believed him. His phone, once casually left on counters, now stayed in his pocket. Face down. Password. When it buzzed during the rare dinners they shared, his eyes would flick to it with an intensity he never showed her anymore. She wanted to confront him. Wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand the truth that was rotting between them like something dead and unburied. But she was so tired. Tired in her bones. Tired in her soul. And terrified that if she spoke the truth out loud, her entire world would confirm what her heart already knew. Then came the night of the charity gala. Elliot had mentioned it casually over breakfast, or rather, over her breakfast. He'd been on his phone, coffee untouched. Sterling Group fundraiser tonight. Black tie. I'll be late. Can I come? The words escaped before she could stop them. When was the last time they'd been out together? When was the last time she'd felt like his wife instead of his obligation? He looked up, and the flicker of panic in his eyes told her everything. It's a work thing. Corporate. You'd be bored. I used to go to work things with you all the time. That was before. He stood, grabbing his briefcase. Before you had other priorities. The door closed behind him at 7:15 a.m. He didn't come home until 3:30 a.m. And when he did, stumbling slightly, tie missing, that perfume was everywhere. On his jacket. His skin. His hair. Eliana was sitting in the dark living room, waiting. She'd been nursing Micah, but the baby had long since fallen asleep. Still she held him, needing his warmth, his innocence, his proof that something good had come from this wreckage. Elliot saw her and froze. Don't. Her voice was steady. Cold. Just don't. He stared at her, and in the blue glow of the baby monitor, she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Relief. Relief that it was finally out in the open. Relief that he wouldn't have to pretend anymore. That night, she smelled the end of her marriage. Her name was Lana Jones, and she collected men the way some people collected art. 42 years old. CEO of Sterling Group, the largest luxury real estate development firm in the D.C. metro area. Forbes had called her a visionary. The Washington Post called her ruthless. Her ex-husbands, all 3 of them, probably had other words. She wore power like perfume. Custom suits from Milan. Heels that clicked like gunshots on marble floors. Hair so perfectly styled it looked like armor. And she decided Elliot Anderson was her next acquisition. Narcissists have a pattern, you see. They don't choose their replacements randomly. They choose strategically. They find someone already drowning, someone desperate for a life raft, someone whose ego is bruised and whose pride is wounded. Someone vulnerable. Elliot had been so vulnerable. It started 6 months earlier, at a Sterling Group executive mixer. One of those glittering affairs with champagne fountains and chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. Elliot had been standing near the bar, third drink in hand, tie loosened, complaining to a colleague about his life. 3 babies, he'd said, voice bitter. All at once. Do you know what that does to your life? Your marriage? Everything. Sounds tough, the colleague had offered half-heartedly. Tough? It's a prison sentence. That's when Lana appeared. She'd been watching him all night, the way a hawk watches a wounded rabbit. She'd done her research. Elliot Anderson, 31, MBA from Harvard, stuck in middle management, ambitious but blocked, married with new triplets, drowning in domestic chaos. Perfect. Elliot Anderson, she'd said, appearing at his elbow like smoke. I've been reading your proposals on the Meridian project. Impressive work. He turned, and she'd watched his pupils dilate. Everyone had that reaction to Lana. She engineered it, the right dress, the right angle, the right amount of attention that felt like sunlight after years in shadow. Ms. Jones. He'd straightened immediately. I thank you. I didn't think you read middle management proposals. I read everything that might make me money. She'd smiled, slow and deliberate. And you, Elliot, have ideas that interest me. The way she'd said his name, like a promise and a secret combined, he was hooked before he knew it. She'd made it seem organic. A work opportunity. Private strategy sessions. Late-night consultations on projects that always seemed to require just one more meeting. She was brilliant at it. Never rushed. Never obvious. Just slowly, methodically, showing him a life he could have. A life of influence, luxury, importance. A life where he wasn't changing diapers at 3 a.m. or watching his bank account drain with every pediatrician visit. A life where he mattered. And then one night after a particularly successful presentation, champagne flowing, adrenaline high, in her corner office overlooking the Potomac, she'd made her move. You're wasted in that life, Elliot, she'd said softly, standing too close, her perfume intoxicating. You could be extraordinary. If you let yourself. He'd kissed her first. Or maybe she'd let him think he did. Either way, it didn't matter. Back at home, Eliana was sensing the shift without knowing its shape. She'd met Lana once, briefly, at a company holiday party 2 years ago. Before the babies. Before everything fell apart. Lana had looked at her with those assessing eyes, the kind that calculated your worth in seconds, and smiled politely. Elliot's wife, she'd said, extending a manicured hand. He speaks so highly of you. Even then, something had felt wrong. The way Lana's smile didn't reach her eyes. The way she'd held Eliana's hand a beat too long, as if measuring something. But Eliana had dismissed it. She dismissed a lot of things back then. Now, sitting in her living room at 3 a.m., her husband reeking of another woman's perfume, those memories crystallized into understanding. It was Lana. She didn't know how she knew. But she knew. The late nights had started after Elliot began working on special projects for the CEO. The distance had grown after those private strategy sessions. The contempt in his eyes had appeared after he tasted a life without consequences, without crying babies, without a wife who'd chosen motherhood over ambition. Lana hadn't just taken her husband. She'd shown him a mirror that reflected who he'd always wanted to be, someone important, someone powerful, someone unencumbered. And Elliot, weak and selfish and desperate for validation, had walked toward that reflection like a man possessed. Eliana sat in the darkness, her sleeping son in her arms, and understood with perfect clarity. She was fighting a woman who collected souls. A woman who saw marriages as obstacles. A woman who always got what she wanted. She didn't know Lana's company would soon own her husband's soul. The first bill came 3 days after Elliot stopped coming home regularly. Eliana found it in the mailbox while juggling a diaper bag and 3 car seats, a carefully choreographed ballet of survival she perfected out of necessity. Final notice. Electricity. $847.32. Her hands shook as she stared at the red letters. They'd always split bills. That was the agreement. He handled utilities and mortgage. She handled groceries and medical copays. Except he hadn't handled anything. She called him 4 times. Each call went to voicemail. Finally, a text, busy. Figure it out. Figure it out. 3 words that might as well have been a death sentence. She checked their joint account that night after the babies finally, fell asleep. $143.27. Her stomach dropped. Last month, there'd been nearly $4,000. Her freelance design payments. His paycheck deposits. Their safety net. Where had it gone? She scrolled through transactions with shaking hands, and there it was, ATM withdrawal. $3,500. 2 weeks ago. Location, Georgetown. 10:47 p.m. The same night he'd said he was working late. Eliana sat at their kitchen table, laptop glowing in the darkness, and felt something inside her break cleanly. Not shatter. Shattering implied drama. This was quieter. A surgical severing of the last thread of hope she'd been clinging to. He wasn't coming back. And she was alone. Josiah woke up screaming at 1:30 a.m. fever of 101.5. She spent 2 hours in the ER. Insurance card declined twice before finally going through. The doctor said viral infection. Fluids. Tylenol. Watch him. The bill would come later. $1,847 for 2 hours and a prescription. At 3:47 a.m., she sat at the kitchen table, Josiah finally sleeping against her chest in the carrier, Arya and Micah in their rockers beside her, the soft white noise machine creating static that filled the silence like television snow. She should have been sleeping. God, she needed sleep. Instead, she pulled out her old sketchbook. The one from college. From when she believed she could design buildings that changed lives. Before Elliot. Before everything. Her hand moved almost without permission. Pen scratching against paper. Lines. Angles. Structural calculations she hadn't thought about in years. Scratch. 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 The baby monitor crackled with soft static. She sketched a community center. Sustainable materials. Accessible design. The kind of project she used to dream about before dreams became luxuries she couldn't afford. Scratch. Scratch. The clock ticked toward 4 a.m. Her hand cramped. She kept drawing. Because here's what happened in that 3 a.m. darkness, in that kitchen that smelled like sour milk and desperation. Eliana Myers stopped waiting to be saved. The sketches came every night after that. Between feedings. Between diaper changes. Between moments of panic when she checked her bank account and watched it drain like blood from an open wound. She drew residential complexes. Commercial spaces. Renovation plans for historic buildings. Her engineering degree, collecting dust in her mind for years, suddenly roared back to life. The bills kept coming. Past due. Final notice. Disconnect warning. She started selling things. Her wedding jewelry. The designer bag Elliot had bought her for their anniversary. Kitchen appliances they'd registered for but never used. It wasn't enough. Arya developed a respiratory infection. Another ER visit. Another bill she couldn't pay. Elliot's texts became fewer. Then stopped entirely. His lawyer sent papers. Official ones. Divorce. Custody terms that were laughable. He wanted every other weekend. Like these were normal children with a normal schedule. Not premature triplets who still had weekly specialist appointments. The papers also mentioned child support, $800 per month. For 3 children. $800. She laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was broken and sharp and slightly unhinged. That wouldn't even cover formula. But something was changing inside her. Crystallizing. Hardening like steel tempered in fire. She'd spent months being a victim. Being the woman abandoned. Being the tragedy everyone whispered about. She was done. At 3:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, Micah asleep on her lap, she opened her laptop and started writing an email. To her old professor from Georgetown. Dr. Patricia Chen. The one who told her she had exceptional spatial intelligence, and the kind of vision the industry needed. Dear Dr. Chen. I know it's been 4 years. I know I fell off the map. But I'm ready now. I need to know if there are any consulting opportunities, any projects, anything where someone might take a chance on a single mother with 3 infants and something to prove. I'm not looking for charity. I'm looking for a chance. Her finger hovered over the send button. In the darkness, illuminated only by the laptop screen, Eliana made a choice. She hit send. Then she picked up her pen and started sketching again. Scratch. 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 The baby monitor static hummed like approval. She wasn't building houses. She was building a way out. Dr. Chun responded at 6:47 a.m. Eliana was mid-feeding, Arya on her left breast, bottle propped for Josiah with her elbow, Micah waiting impatiently in his rocker, when her phone lit up. She almost didn't check it. Almost let it sit there, glowing with possibility, while she finished the feeding routine that had become her entire existence. But something made her look. Eliana, I've been wondering about you. Call me today. I might have something. Her heart stopped. Then started again, faster. She called at 9:03 a.m., babies finally down for their morning nap, her voice shaking with exhaustion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Myers Consult Group, Dr. Chen said without preamble. That's what you'll call it. Not Anderson. Not your married name. Yours. Your vision. Your work. I don't have a company. You do now. I'm sending you a contract. Small historical renovation in Alexandria. The client owes me a favor, and I told them I had the perfect consultant. You have 72 hours to submit a proposal. Eliana's hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. Dr. Chun, I haven't worked in years. I have 3 infants. Do you still have that brilliant mind? Do you? Yes. Then stop making excuses and start making blueprints. The call ended. Eliana stood in her living room, surrounded by baby equipment and unpaid bills and the wreckage of her life, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Determination. She didn't need a hero. She didn't need Elliot to come back, repentant and reformed. She didn't need Lana Jones to have a crisis of conscience. She needed blueprints, grit, and God. That was it. So she built it. Myers Consult Group launched on a Tuesday at 11:47 p.m., registered through a website that cost $49 and looked semi-professional if you didn't zoom in too close. The logo was something she designed herself using free software. Clean lines, her initials, simple but elegant. The proposal took her 4 days. 4 days of working between feedings, during naps, at 2 a.m. when the babies finally slept and her body screamed for rest but her mind refused to stop. She submitted it at 4:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the deadline, and then promptly threw up from stress and exhaustion. Then she waited. The silence was excruciating. 2 days. 3 days. A week. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming. The electricity got shut off for 16 hours before she scraped together enough to get it reconnected. The mortgage company sent another final notice. She started sending cold emails to every contact she'd ever made in the industry. Most didn't respond. Some politely declined. A few offered condescending advice about better timing, and perhaps when your children are older. But one said maybe. A small firm in Bethesda needed help with sustainable building consultations. Contract work. $1,500 for a completed assessment. She took it. Completed it in 3 days while the babies had stomach flu and she ran on 90 minutes of sleep and prayer. The check arrived. $1,500 felt like 15 million. She paid the electric bill. Bought formula. Breathed. And then she kept going. Late-night emails became her religion. The blue glow of her laptop, her sanctuary. Each message carefully crafted, professional, desperate in ways she'd never let show. Dear Mr. Harrison, I noticed your firm recently won the Clarendon contract. I have experience in historic preservation and sustainable design integration. Would you be open to discussing potential consultation opportunities? Send. Dear Ms. Rodriguez, your work on the Metro expansion project was innovative. I'd love to explore how my structural engineering background might support future initiatives. Send. Dear Sterling Group Development Team. She paused on that one. Sterling Group. Lana's company. Elliot's new world. Her finger hovered over delete. Then she rewrote it. Professional. Cold. Perfect. I noticed your RFP for the Northeast Corridor mixed-use development. Myers Consult Group specializes in efficient structural design and cost-effective sustainable solutions. Please find attached our portfolio and rate structure. She hit send before she could second-guess it. Probably nothing would come of it. Probably they'd never even see it. But at 3:42 a.m., covered in spit-up, running on rage and caffeine, Eliana Myers clicked refresh on her email one more time. And there it was. Subject line, Federal Infrastructure Initiative, Request for Proposal. Her heart stopped. Federal. Infrastructure. Initiative. She clicked. Dear Ms. Myers, your name came highly recommended by Dr. Patricia Chun. The Department of Transportation is seeking consulting firms for a major infrastructure modernization project. Estimated contract value, $750 million over 3 years. Proposal deadline, 30 days. Are you interested? She read it once. Twice. 3 times. $750 million. And one click would change her life forever. One subject line. 8 words. Her entire world stopped. Federal Infrastructure Initiative, Request for Proposal. Eliana stared at the screen, her vision blurring. She blinked. Read it again. The words didn't change. $750 million. Her hand moved to her mouth. The The other gripped the edge of the kitchen table so hard her knuckles turned white. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. She clicked the attachment with trembling fingers. Request for proposal, Northeast Corridor Transportation Modernization Initiative. Contract term, 36 months. Estimated value, $750 million. Lead consultant requirements, structural engineering expertise, sustainable design integration, federal project experience preferred but not required. Proposal due, November 30th. 23 days from now. The numbers swam before her eyes. $750 million. Even a percentage of that, even a fraction, would mean everything. It would mean electricity that stayed on. Formula she didn't have to ration. Medical bills she could actually pay. A future where her children didn't grow up in the wreckage of her destroyed marriage. It would mean she could breathe. Her legs gave out. She slid from the chair to the floor, laptop still open on the table above her, and pressed her forehead against her knees. A sob built in her chest, but not from despair. From possibility. From the terrifying, intoxicating realization that maybe, she wasn't going to drown after all. Arya started crying from the nursery. Then Micah. Then Josiah, their cries overlapping like a symphony of need. Eliana stayed on the floor for 5 more seconds, letting tears streak down her face, letting herself feel the weight of this moment. Then she stood up, wiped her face, and went to her babies. As she lifted Arya from her crib, the little girl's cries softening against her shoulder, Eliana whispered into the darkness. We're going to make it. I promise you. We're going to make it. The next 3 weeks were a blur of brutal, relentless work. She wrote during naps. She calculated during feedings. She revised at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., any moment the babies gave her. Dr. Chun connected her with a retired federal contract specialist who reviewed her proposal for $200 she didn't have but borrowed anyway. This is good, he'd said, scanning her structural designs. Really good. You have a shot. A shot. That's all she needed. She designed a modular system for railway modernization that could be implemented in phases, reducing upfront costs by 30%. She incorporated sustainable materials that qualified for federal green energy incentives. She created contingency plans for every potential obstacle. It was the best work of her life. And she did it all alone. No Elliot to bounce ideas off. No partner to encourage her. Just her, 3 babies, and a desperate determination that felt like oxygen. On November 29th, at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the deadline, she hit submit. The confirmation screen loaded. Proposal received. Application ID, FI, 2024-0847. You will be notified of our decision within 45 to 60 days. Eliana closed her laptop. 45 to 60 days. She could survive that. She'd survived worse. But here's what they don't tell you about hope. It makes you vulnerable again. It opens doors you'd welded shut for self-protection. It makes you believe in futures you'd taught yourself to stop imagining. And vulnerability, especially for someone who'd been shattered as completely as Eliana, was terrifying. She checked her email obsessively. Every morning. Every night. During feedings. During the rare moments the babies slept simultaneously. Nothing. 1 week passed. 2 weeks. Bills continued arriving. The mortgage company sent another notice, this one more aggressive. Foreclosure proceedings would begin in 30 days without payment. She needed $12,000. She had 417. On day 18 after submitting her proposal, Arya developed pneumonia. Real pneumonia this time, not just a virus. Hospital admission. Oxygen. 4 antibiotics. Eliana sat by her daughter's hospital bed, watching the monitors, listening to the labored breathing of her smallest miracle, and thought, please let something good happen. Just once. But fate doesn't give without testing first. The same night Arya was hospitalized, Lana Jones hosted the social event of the season. The Sterling Group Annual Charity Gala. Black tie. $1,000 per plate. Held at the National Portrait Gallery, where Washington's elite gathered to see and be seen, to broker deals under the guise of philanthropy. Elliot stood in the grand hall, champagne in hand, wearing a tuxedo Lana had bought him. He looked good. He knew it. The weight he'd lost, stress or maybe freedom, made him look distinguished rather than haggard. His hair was freshly cut. His shoes gleamed. He looked like a man who'd escaped something rather than abandoned it. Lana appeared at his side, devastating in a red gown that probably cost more than his old mortgage payment. She slipped her arm through his with practiced ease. "Ready?" she murmured. "For what?" Her smile was sharp. "To make it official." Before he could ask what she meant, Lana was guiding him toward the small stage where the evening's announcements were made. The crowd quieted as she took the microphone, every eye in the room fixed on her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Lana began, her voice smooth as silk. "Sterling Group has always been about building futures, creating legacies, and tonight, I'm thrilled to share that I'm building something new in my personal life as well." Elliot's stomach dropped. "I'd like to introduce you all to Elliot Anderson," she turned to him, her smile radiant and possessive, "my partner in life and business. We're building something extraordinary together." The room erupted in polite applause. Cameras flashed. Elliot's face was frozen in what he hoped looked like joy but felt like paralysis. Partner in life. Not boyfriend. Not companion. Partner in life. It was a claim. A brand. A public declaration that he belonged to her now. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered, "What have you done?" But he smiled. Raised his glass. Let Lana kiss his cheek while Washington's power players watched and judged and calculated what this meant for their own ambitions. 23 miles away, in a pediatric hospital room, Eliana sat in an uncomfortable chair pulled close to Aria's bed. Her daughter was breathing easier now. The antibiotics were working. But Eliana couldn't sleep. She scrolled through her phone mindlessly, anything to distract from the beeping monitors and the crushing weight of medical bills she couldn't pay. That's when she saw it. A social media post from someone she'd forgotten she was still connected to. A former colleague from Elliot's office. The photo showed a glittering ballroom. Beautiful people in expensive clothes. And their center frame. Elliot and Lana. Her hand wrapped around his arm. His smile wide and easy. The caption, "Sterling Group's power couple making it official. Congrats Elliot and Lana." The phone slipped from Eliana's hand. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what she was seeing. Power couple. He'd left her with 3 sick babies, drained their savings, disappeared from their lives, and moved on to red carpets and champagne. While she sat in a hospital room, wearing the same clothes for the 3rd day, watching their daughter fight for breath. Aria stirred, making a small sound. Eliana picked up her phone with shaking hands, looked at the photo one more time, then deliberately turned it off. She wouldn't cry. Not anymore. She'd cried enough for that man. Instead, she held Aria's tiny hand and made a silent promise. He will regret this. I don't know how yet. But he will. Aria came home 3 days later. The hospital bill was $47,000. Insurance covered some. But Eliana's portion was still $12,400. The same amount as the mortgage payment she couldn't make. She stood in her kitchen, 2 bills in her hands, trying to do math that didn't work. Trying to figure out which disaster to postpone. That's when she saw it. Through the window. A car pulling up. Official looking. A person getting out with an envelope. Her heart stopped. Process server. Foreclosure papers. She watched through the window as the person walked up her front steps. Heard the knock. Aria started crying from the nursery. The knock came again. Eliana opened the door. "Eliana Myers?" the woman asked. "Yes." The envelope was thick. Official. Her hands shook as she took it. "Have a good day," the woman said, already walking away. Eliana closed the door. Looked down at the envelope. Foreclosure notice. Final demand. She had 30 days to pay $12,000 or lose her home. She sank against the door, envelope clutched in her hand, and felt the last piece of her old life crumble away. The next day, the envelope arrived, and everything collapsed. Eliana sat at her kitchen table, foreclosure notice spread before her like a death certificate, and did something she'd been avoiding for weeks. She logged into their joint savings account. The one they'd opened together 7 years ago. The one that was supposed to be untouchable. Emergency funds. Their children's future. The safety net they'd both agreed never to touch without discussing it first. Her hands trembled as she typed the password. The screen loaded. And her world ended. $0. Available balance, $0. She stared at the numbers. Blinked. Refreshed the page. $0. No. No, that wasn't possible. There had been $18,000 in that account 3 months ago. She'd checked it when the babies came home from the NICU. $18,472. Their security. Their hope. She clicked on transaction history with fingers that had gone numb. There. October 15th. Withdrawal. $18,472. Wire transfer. Authorization. Elliot M. Anderson. Destination. Account ending in 7743. Not their account. Not hers. His. He'd taken everything. Every. Single. Dollar. The babies were crying in the nursery, that constant background symphony of need, but Eliana couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Her mind tried to process it. Tried to make sense of it. They had an agreement. That money was sacred. That money was for emergencies, for their children, for the life they'd promised to build together. And he'd just taken it. While she was sitting in a NICU, holding their premature babies, praying they'd survive. While she was rationing formula and selling her jewelry. While she was drowning. He'd been transferring their life savings to an account she didn't have access to. The silence in her kitchen was deafening. Absolute. The kind of quiet that exists in the seconds after a bomb detonates, before your ears start working again. Then the crying broke through. Micah. Aria. Josiah. All three, escalating from fussing to full wails. The contrast was horrifying. Their desperate cries for food, comfort, safety, needs she could barely meet, against the absolute silence of this betrayal. She stood up, legs shaking, and walked to the nursery on autopilot. Picked up Micah first. Then Aria. Josiah in the carrier against her chest. 3 babies. 3 lives that depended entirely on her. And Elliot had left her with nothing. No money. No support. No safety net. Nothing. She sat in the rocking chair, feeding Micah while Aria and Josiah cried, and felt something inside her transform. It wasn't anger yet. Anger would come later. This was something colder. Sharper. Clarity. He hadn't just left her. He'd sabotaged her. Deliberately drained their accounts before abandoning ship, making sure she'd struggle, making sure she'd fail. Why? To justify his choices? To prove she couldn't do it alone? To make himself feel less guilty about the woman he was already sleeping with? It didn't matter. What mattered was this. He left her nothing, except a reason. A reason to fight. To survive. To prove that she was more than the broken woman he'd discarded. She looked down at her 3 babies, her 3 miracles, and whispered, "He took our money, but he doesn't get to take our future." If you think that's rock bottom, you haven't seen how she rises. The call came on a Wednesday at 9:17 a.m. Eliana was in the middle of changing 3 diapers simultaneously, a logistical nightmare she perfected out of necessity, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. She almost didn't answer. Probably a collections agency. Another bill she couldn't pay. Another reminder of how completely her life had fallen apart. But something made her pick up. Hello. Ms. Myers? Eliana Myers of Myers Consult Group. The voice was professional. Female. Official sounding. Yes, this is she. Eliana wedged the phone between her shoulder and ear, still fastening Josiah's diaper. This is Catherine Walsh from the Department of Transportation, Federal Infrastructure Initiative. Do you have a moment to speak? Eliana's hands froze. The contract. Oh God. The $750 million contract. Yes, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I have a moment. Ms. Myers, I'm pleased to inform you that your proposal for the Northeast Corridor Transportation Modernization Initiative has been selected for the final round of consideration. Out of 147 submissions, yours was one of 3 chosen to proceed. The room tilted. What? Your structural design approach and cost efficiency models were exceptional. We'd like to schedule a formal presentation for 2 weeks from today. Will you be available? Eliana looked around her tiny kitchen. At the unpaid bills stacked on the counter. At the foreclosure notice. At her 3 babies, finally content in their clean diapers, looking up at her with those impossibly trusting eyes. Yes, she said, her voice stronger now. Yes, I'll be there. Excellent. I'm emailing you the details now. Ms. Myers. Catherine's voice softened slightly. Your work is impressive. Truly. We're looking forward to meeting you. The call ended. Eliana stood in her kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, and felt tears streaming down her face. Final round. Top 3. Out of 147. Her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, carefully, always carefully, aware of the babies watching her, and pressed her hands to her face. She'd done it. Without Elliot. Without support. Without sleep or money or any of the things everyone said she needed to succeed. She'd done it anyway. The tears came harder now. Not from despair. From something bigger than hope. From the sudden, overwhelming realization that she wasn't powerless. She'd never been powerless. She'd just forgotten. 5 seconds. 5 perfect, crystalline seconds. Eliana Myers let herself feel it. The weight lifting. The future opening. The impossible becoming possible. Then Arya started fussing, pulling her back to reality. Eliana wiped her face, stood up, and picked up her daughter. "Did you hear that?" she whispered against Arya's soft hair. "Mommy's going to save us." The next 2 weeks were a different kind of hell. She prepared her presentation with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. Every slide perfect. Every calculation triple-checked. Every word rehearsed until it was muscle memory. She borrowed a suit from a friend. Practiced her pitch in the mirror while babies slept. Lined up childcare she couldn't afford from a neighbor who owed her a favor. And on presentation day, she walked into that federal building with her head high and her portfolio perfect. 3 officials sat across from her. Serious faces. Expensive suits. The weight of $750 million in their hands. She didn't falter. For 45 minutes, Eliana Myers showed them exactly who she was. Not a victim. Not a struggling single mother. Not someone to be pitied. An engineer. A visionary. A consultant who could deliver excellence under impossible circumstances. When she finished, the lead official, a man in his 60s with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Ms. Myers, that was outstanding. Truly. We have one question." Her heart pounded. "Yes. Your firm is new. Very new. This is an enormous undertaking. Can you handle this kind of scale?" She thought about Elliot draining their accounts. About foreclosure notices. About feeding babies at 3 a.m. while designing infrastructure plans. About surviving every single thing that should have destroyed her. "Sir," she said calmly, "I've been managing impossible situations my entire life. This is what I do. I identify problems, I create solutions, and I deliver results. The only difference between this project and what I've already accomplished is that this one actually has adequate resources." Silence. Then the man smiled. "We'll be in touch within 72 hours. The call came in 61. "Ms. Myers, this is Catherine Walsh. On behalf of the Department of Transportation, I'm pleased to inform you that Myers Consult Group has been awarded the Northeast Corridor Transportation Modernization Initiative contract. Congratulations." Eliana was holding Micah when she got the news. She must have made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, because he looked up at her with concerned eyes. "The contract," she whispered. "The full contract." "The full contract. $750 million over 3 years. Your team will be the lead consultant on the largest infrastructure modernization project in the region's history." Catherine continued talking, details about signing, timelines, initial payments, but Eliana couldn't hear anymore. Because the woman Elliot Anderson abandoned with 3 sick babies and empty bank accounts had just secured $750 million. The woman he abandoned had just become his competition. Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever had a moment where you proved everyone who doubted you dead wrong. Because this is just the beginning of Elliot's nightmare. Eliana built her empire in silence. No press releases. No social media announcements. No victory laps. Just work. The first payment from the federal contract hit her account on a Friday, $47 million. She stared at the number for a full minute, unable to process that it was real, that it was hers. Then she paid off the foreclosure in full, settled every medical bill, bought formula in bulk, and got to work. Myers Consult Group needed infrastructure. Fast. She hired carefully. Strategically. A project manager who'd worked on the Big Dig in Boston. A sustainable design specialist from Copenhagen. A structural engineer who'd been laid off from a larger firm and was hungry to prove himself. No one flashy. No one with ego problems. Just brilliant, dedicated people who understood what it meant to build something meaningful. She leased office space in a modest building in Arlington. Nothing fancy. Function over flash. 3 rooms with good light and enough space for drafting tables. Her babysitter became full-time. A woman named Rosa who loved the triplets like they were her own grandchildren and never asked questions about why Eliana worked 16-hour days. The designs flowed like water breaking through a dam. Railway modernization plans. Station redesigns. Sustainable material integration. Every blueprint better than the last. Federal officials praised her responsiveness. Her innovation. Her ability to deliver ahead of schedule. Myers Consult Group's reputation grew quietly but steadily. Word of mouth in an industry that valued results over rhetoric. And through it all, Eliana kept her personal life separate. Locked away. Protected. No one knew about Elliot. About the divorce that was still being finalized. About the man who'd left her with nothing and expected her to disappear. 6 months into the contract, she did something symbolic. She'd been working late in her office, reviewing structural load calculations, when she noticed her wedding ring. She still wore it, out of habit more than sentiment. The gold band had become invisible to her, just another part of her hand. But that night, under the fluorescent lights, it caught her eye. She twisted it off slowly. Looked at the inscription inside, Forever, E.N.E. Forever had lasted 4 years. The next morning, she took it to a jeweler in Georgetown. "I'd like to trade this in," she said, placing the ring on the counter. The jeweler examined it. "Beautiful piece. What are you looking for in exchange?" "A company logo. Custom design. Gold pin. Professional quality." He looked at her, really looked at her, and seemed to understand something without her having to explain. "I can do that," he said softly. 2 weeks later, she picked up a small gold pin. Elegant. Minimalist. The letters MCG intertwined in a design that looked like blueprints and bridges combined. She wore it every day after that. A reminder, she traded a promise that was broken for a legacy she was building. But here's what they don't tell you about rising from devastation. Power heals slower than love breaks. Eliana had money now. Security. Success. Respect from her industry peers. But at 3 a.m., when the babies were finally asleep and the house was quiet, she still felt the ghost of Elliot's betrayal like a phantom limb. Still flinched when she saw couples holding hands. Still caught herself checking her phone, some buried part of her expecting an apology that would never come. Healing wasn't linear. It was messy. Some days she felt invincible. Other days, a song on the radio would remind her of their wedding and she'd have to pull over and cry. But she kept building anyway. Hired 3 more engineers. Took on 2 additional federal projects. Expanded into private sector consultations. Her bank account grew. Her reputation grew. Her confidence grew. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, she began to believe in herself again. Myers Consult Group became the firm people whispered about. The underdog. The newcomer who was outperforming companies that had been in business for 30 years. Industry magazines requested interviews. She declined them all. Award ceremonies invited her. She sent her project manager instead. She didn't want attention. She wanted results. And results were what she delivered. By month 9 of the contract, Myers Consult Group had grown to 15 employees. By month 12, 25. Each person carefully chosen. Each bringing something essential. They worked like a family. Eliana made sure of it. She knew what it felt like to be abandoned, so she built a company where people felt valued. Seen. Appreciated. Her team was loyal in ways money couldn't buy. And somewhere in the construction of this empire, in the late nights and early mornings, in the blueprints and calculations and small victories, Eliana Myers transformed. Not into someone new. Into someone she'd always been but had forgotten. Strong. Capable. Unstoppable. The woman Elliot had discarded was gone. In her place stood someone he wouldn't recognize. Someone he should fear. And soon, whispers of her name reached him. Elliot first heard the name Myers Consult Group in a Sterling Group executive meeting. It was a Tuesday morning. Coffee and pastries. Quarterly review. Lana at the head of the table, sharp and irritated. "We lost the metro expansion bid," she said, her voice tight. "Second major contract this quarter." "Who got it?" someone asked. Lana's assistant checked her tablet. A firm called Myers Consult Group. They underbid us by 18% and offered a faster timeline. Elliot barely registered it. Myers was a common name. He was more focused on the way Lana's jaw tightened, a sign she was about to make someone's life hell. Find out everything about them, Lana ordered. I want to know who's running this company and why they're suddenly everywhere. The meeting moved on. But over the next 3 months, that name kept appearing. Myers Consult Group won the Arlington Transit Station redesign. Myers Consult Group secured a federal infrastructure contract. Myers Consult Group was praised in Engineering Weekly for innovative sustainable design integration. Each mention was a small crack in Sterling Group's dominance. And each mention made Lana more agitated. Elliot watched his girlfriend, no, his partner in life, as she publicly claimed him, become increasingly obsessed with this mysterious competitor. They came out of nowhere, Lana said one night in her penthouse, scrolling through industry reports. No history. No track record. And suddenly they're outbidding us on projects we've dominated for years. Maybe they're just good, Elliot offered. She shot him a look that could have cut glass. Nobody's that good that fast. There's something we're missing. Elliot poured himself another drink. His third. Or fourth. He'd lost count lately. Life with Lana was different than he'd expected. The glamour was real. The galas, the expensive dinners, the penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows. But so was the pressure. She expected him to be brilliant constantly. To network aggressively. To prove his worth beyond just being her arm candy. And lately, he'd been failing. The divorce from Eliana was finalized, but messy. His lawyer had advised him that refusing to pay adequate child support looked bad. But Lana thought any money going to his former life was wasted resources. He hadn't seen his children in 7 months. Hadn't asked about them either, if he was honest. It was easier not to think about it. Easier to pretend that chapter was closed. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Lana had organized a pitch for a massive mixed-use development in Northeast DC. Private investors. Deep pockets. Sterling Group's specialty. Elliot sat in the conference room, half listening, when one of the investors asked a question. We've been impressed with Myers Consult Group's federal work. Have you considered partnering with them for the infrastructure components? Lana's smile was glacial. We prefer to keep all aspects in-house. Even if it costs you the bid? Tension crackled through the room. Myers Consult Group, another investor chimed in, has a reputation for efficiency we find appealing. Their lead consultant is supposed to be exceptional. Who is their lead consultant? Lana asked, voice dangerously calm. The investor checked his notes. A woman named Eliana Myers. Young. Georgetown educated. Engineering background. She's the one who secured that massive DOT contract last year. The room continued talking, but Elliot had stopped breathing. Eliana. Myers. His Eliana? No. His ex-wife Eliana? It wasn't possible. She was drowning in debt and diapers when he left. She barely had time to shower, let alone run a consulting firm. This had to be a different Eliana Myers. But even as he thought it, something cold settled in his stomach. After the meeting, he did what he'd avoided doing for months. He Googled her name. And there she was. Professional headshot. Hair styled. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than their old rent. Looking confident. Powerful. Nothing like the exhausted, desperate woman he'd left behind. Eliana Myers, founder and CEO of Myers Consult Group, specializes in sustainable infrastructure design and federal contract consultation. His hand shook as he scrolled through articles. Myers Consult Group awarded $750 million federal infrastructure contract. $750 million. The room spun. That was his wife. His exhausted, struggling, supposedly helpless wife. No. Ex-wife. The woman he'd left with 3 babies and empty bank accounts. She'd won a $750 million contract. Elliot. Lana's voice cut through his spiral. She was standing in the doorway of his office, looking at him with those assessing eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost. He closed his laptop too quickly. Just tired. She walked closer, leaned against his desk. This Myers woman. The one everyone's talking about. Do you know anything about her? His throat was dry. Why would I? You tell me. Lana's eyes narrowed. You got very quiet when her name came up. I'm fine. I don't know her. But Lana was a predator. She could smell fear. Find out who she is, she said softly. If she's going to be a problem, I want to know everything. She left. Elliot sat in his office, staring at Eliana's photo on the screen. The woman he'd mocked for being just a mother. The woman he'd said was drowning. The woman he'd abandoned because she was supposedly holding him back. She wasn't drowning anymore. The woman he destroyed was now his destroyer. Have you ever watched karma work in real time? Comment karma if you're living for this moment, because Elliot's nightmare is just getting started. Elliot showed up at her construction site on a Thursday afternoon. Eliana was reviewing foundation plans with her site manager when she saw him. Standing at the perimeter fence, wearing one of those expensive suits Lana probably bought him, looking completely out of place among the dust and machinery. Her heart didn't skip, didn't race, didn't do anything at all. That's how she knew she'd changed. Give me a minute, she told her manager, handing back the clipboard. She walked toward Elliot slowly, deliberately. Her boots crunched on gravel. A crane swung overhead. The sound of construction, hammering, drilling, building, filled the silence between them. He looked older, tired in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. Eliana. Her name came out rough, uncertain. She stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to talk. Far enough to maintain distance. Elliot. He seemed surprised she wasn't more emotional. Maybe he'd expected tears. Or anger. Or some reaction that proved he still mattered. You look good, he said. I am good. Silence. A jackhammer started up somewhere behind her. I heard about your company, he continued, shoving his hands in his pockets. The federal contract. That's impressive, El. Don't call me that. His jaw tightened. Right. Sorry. She waited. Didn't help him. Didn't make this easier. Just stood there in her hard hat and work boots, covered in construction dust, and let him struggle. Look, I know things ended badly between us. Badly. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You drained our savings account. Left me with 3 premature babies and a foreclosure notice. You didn't just end things badly, Elliot. You tried to destroy me. I didn't mean, he ran a hand through his hair. I was overwhelmed. I made mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to buy milk. What you did was calculated cruelty. A cement mixer roared to life. Elliot had to raise his voice. I want to talk about the kids. About us working together maybe. Lana's company and yours. There could be opportunities. And there it was. Not apology. Not remorse. Opportunity. Eliana felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Let me make something very clear to you, she said quietly, and somehow her voice cut through all the construction noise. You left when love was inconvenient. When your children needed you most. When I was fighting for their lives while you were fucking your boss. He flinched at the profanity. She never used to curse. Don't come back now because success is magnetic. Don't show up at my job site because you finally realized I wasn't the worthless housewife you told yourself I was. Don't you dare stand here and talk about opportunities. Eliana, I made mistakes, but those are still my children. You have 3 children you haven't seen in 14 months. You pay $800 a month in child support for triplets with ongoing medical needs. You signed away custody without even asking for visitation. Her voice never rose. Never wavered. You're not a father. You're a sperm donor with regrets. His face flushed red. Anger, finally. The real Elliot breaking through the polished veneer. You think you're better than me now? Because you got lucky with one contract. Lucky. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I built this company while feeding 3 infants alone. While you were sleeping in Lana Jones's penthouse, I was sketching blueprints at 3 a.m. While you were at galas, I was in the hospital with pneumonia cases and empty bank accounts. She stepped closer. Close enough to see the guilt he was trying to hide behind indignation. I didn't get lucky, Elliot. I got free. Free of a man who saw his family as a burden. Free of someone who measured love by convenience. Free of you. I want to see my kids. Then hire a lawyer and file for visitation. Go through the proper channels. But don't show up here acting like you're owed access to their lives because you suddenly remember they exist. A supervisor called her name from across the site. She raised a hand in acknowledgement but didn't break eye contact with Elliot. "I have to get back to work," she said. "Building things. Creating things. Succeeding at things. You remember work, right? Or does Lana do all of that for you now?" The hit landed. She saw it in the way his shoulders tensed. "Goodbye, Elliot." She turned and walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Behind her, she heard him call out, "I loved you, you know. I did love you." She paused. Just for a moment. Then continued walking, her voice carrying back over the construction noise. "No. You loved the idea of me. The version that made you look good. You never loved who I actually was." That was the day he realized she no longer loved him. Eliana started buying Sterling Group assets 3 months after Elliot's pathetic visit. Not in her name. Never in her name. She wasn't stupid. She learned to play the game at a level Lana Jones had perfected, through shell companies, silent partnerships, strategic acquisitions that looked unrelated on paper. It started with a distressed property Sterling Group had over-leveraged. A mixed-use development in Silver Spring that was hemorrhaging money. Bad design. Worse management. Investors getting nervous. Eliana's lawyer, a shark named Marcus Chun who she'd hired specifically for his ruthlessness, approached them through a subsidiary company. "We're interested in acquiring the Silver Spring project," he said in a conference room that smelled like expensive leather and desperation. Sterling Group's CFO, desperate to stop the bleeding, barely asked questions. Papers were signed. Money transferred. Deal closed. Sterling Group never knew Myers Consult Group owned it through 3 layers of corporate structure. Eliana gutted the project. Redesigned it from foundation to roof. Brought in her team. Fixed everything Sterling Group had broken. 6 months later, it was profitable. She did it again with a stalled commercial complex in Bethesda. Again with a residential development in Alexandria. Each time, Sterling Group sold to cut their losses. Each time, Eliana bought through intermediaries. Each time, she turned their failures into successes. It was a chess game played in boardrooms and legal documents. Corporate warfare conducted with signatures and wire transfers instead of weapons. And Eliana was winning. Her financial advisor, a woman named Janet who'd worked in mergers and acquisitions for 20 years, was impressed. "You're essentially buying Sterling Group piece by piece without them realizing it," Janet said during one of their strategy sessions. "It's brilliant. Brutal, but brilliant." "They destroyed my life," Eliana said calmly, reviewing acquisition documents. "I'm just returning the favor." "This isn't about revenge though, is it?" Janet studied her carefully. "You're turning their losses into profitable assets. You're building something." Eliana looked up. Revenge and success aren't mutually exclusive. The beautiful thing about corporate acquisition was the silence. No dramatic confrontations. No screaming matches. Just lawyers and paperwork and bank transfers that slowly, methodically, stripped away Sterling Group's foundation. Lana Jones never saw it coming. She was too busy trying to understand why Myers Consult Group kept winning bids. Too focused on the surface competition to notice the structural erosion happening beneath her empire. By month 18 of Eliana's federal contract, she owned 17 properties Sterling Group had been forced to sell. By month 21, her net worth exceeded $30 million. By month 24, she had enough leverage to make her move. The opportunity came in the form of Sterling Group's flagship property, the Morrison Building. 23 stories of luxury condos in downtown D.C. Their crown jewel. The property Lana had built her reputation on. But the Morrison had a secret. It was drowning in debt. Over-leveraged during construction. Maintenance costs exceeding projections. Several major investors pulling out after disappointing returns. Lana was shopping for a buyer quietly. Very quietly. Marcus called Eliana at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. The Morrison Building. "It's available." Lana's desperate, though she'll never admit it. "Asking price is $42 million, but I think we can get it for $38. Eliana sat in her home office, her 3-year-old triplets finally asleep down the hall, and felt a surge of something that wasn't quite satisfaction but close. The Morrison Building. The property Elliot had worked on when they were still married. The project he'd obsessed over. The building he'd literally been touring with Lana the night Eliana had gone into premature labor. She'd been alone in that hospital. terrified, calling him over and over. He'd been at the Morrison groundbreaking ceremony, champagne in hand, already halfway in love with the woman who'd eventually destroy their marriage. Make the offer, Eliana said. 36 million. Cash. Close in 30 days. That's aggressive. They're desperate. They'll take it. They did. The paperwork took 3 weeks. Layers of lawyers and accountants and shell companies ensuring Sterling Group never traced it back to Myers Consult Group. On signing day, Eliana sat in Marcus's office, expensive pen in hand, and reviewed the final documents. The Morrison building, all 23 stories, all 187 luxury units, all of Lana Jones's pride, would officially belong to one of Eliana's holding companies at 5 p.m. You know this will eventually come out, Marcus said. Once you start making decisions about the property, they'll figure out who really owns it. I know. Eliana signed her name with careful precision. And you're okay with that? She looked up, meeting his eyes. I want them to know. Eventually. When I'm ready. What then? Eliana capped her pen and smiled, a smile that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with justice. Then they'll understand that the woman they tried to erase now owns everything they value. She signed the final page. When she signed the final paper, she owned his future. If you could buy out the company that destroyed you, would you do it? Comment yes or no, because what Eliana does with this power is about to get epic. Myers Consult Group grew beyond what Eliana had ever imagined. By year 3, they had offices in 4 cities. 73 employees. Projects spanning from transportation infrastructure to sustainable urban development. Her company wasn't just successful, it was transforming how the industry approached design. But success, Eliana discovered, came with a strange hollowness when you achieved it alone. She had everything now. Financial security. Professional respect. A beautiful home in Bethesda where her children, now 4 years old, had their own playroom and a backyard with swings. Micah, Aria, and Josiah were thriving. Healthy. Happy. They called her mommy, and had no memory of the tiny NICU incubators or the nights she'd sobbed while holding them. They didn't remember their father either. Elliot had never filed for visitation. Never called. Never sent birthday cards. He'd simply disappeared from their lives. And Eliana realized something profound. Revenge had lost its flavor. Owning Sterling Group properties felt empty. Outbidding Lana on contracts felt mechanical. The anger that had fueled her for 3 years had burned itself out, leaving only ash. She sat in her corner office one evening, city lights glittering below, and asked herself a question. What now? She'd proven she could survive. Could succeed. Could build something remarkable from absolute devastation. But building out of spite was exhausting. She wanted to build for something else now. Purpose. The idea came to her at 2 a.m., the hour when her best ideas always arrived. A foundation. For women like her. Single mothers in STEM fields. Women who'd been told they couldn't do both. Couldn't be mothers and engineers. Couldn't be caregivers and leaders. Women who needed someone to believe in them the way no one had believed in her. She started small. 10 scholarships for single mothers pursuing engineering degrees. Mentorship programs connecting students with professionals. Childcare stipends for women attending technical conferences. The Myers Foundation launched quietly, funded entirely by her own money. But the impact was immediate. Applications poured in. Stories that broke her heart and rebuilt it simultaneously. A woman in Baltimore who'd been designing bridges on napkins between shifts at a diner. A mother in Richmond who taught herself CAD software through YouTube videos while her baby slept. A widow in Philadelphia who'd lost her husband and her job in the same month but refused to give up on her dream of becoming a civil engineer. Eliana funded them all. She hired them when they graduated. Gave them opportunities no one else would. Built a network of women who understood what it meant to fight for every single inch of progress. And somewhere in that process, in the funding and mentoring and building of something bigger than herself, Eliana Myers transformed again. Revenge turned into redemption. The anger that had driven her softened into something more powerful, compassion born from survival. She still outmaneuvered Sterling Group. Still acquired their failing properties. Still dominated the contracts they wanted. But now she did it while building futures for women who reminded her of who she'd been. Desperate. Brilliant. Unstoppable. Her triplets grew. Started pre-K. Asked questions about why other kids had daddies and they didn't. Your daddy made a choice, Eliana told them honestly. But you have me. And I love you enough for 2 parents. They seemed satisfied with that. Children were resilient in ways adults forgot to be. On the Foundation's first anniversary, Eliana stood before 50 scholarship recipients and their children, a room full of single mothers and babies and toddlers and hope, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Peace was different. Peace was acceptance that the past couldn't be changed, but the future could be built. You're not broken, she told them. You're not less than because you're doing this alone. You're not defined by who left you. You're defined by what you build after they're gone. The applause was thunderous. And in that moment, Eliana understood she'd won. Not against Elliot or Lana, but against the version of herself who believed she was worthless without him. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who transformed pain into power, survival into service, devastation into legacy. Her empire was unstoppable now, not because of its size, but because of its purpose. But there was still unfinished business. Sterling Group was crumbling. Lana was desperate. Elliot was irrelevant. And Eliana had one final move to make. But destiny wasn't done with them yet. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday morning. Elegant cardstock. Gold lettering. Impossibly tasteful. Sterling Group Annual Charity Gala. A celebration of 5 years of excellence. The National Building Museum. Black tie required. Eliana held it in her hands and smiled. This was Lana's desperation play. One last glittering event to project success while the empire crumbled behind the scenes. To attract investors. To pretend everything was fine. Eliana hadn't been invited, of course. This invitation had been sent to one of her shell companies. A potential investor Lana was courting without knowing who really controlled it. Marcus called her that afternoon. You're not seriously considering going? Why wouldn't I? Because it's a trap. Or at minimum, a disaster waiting to happen. Good, Eliana said calmly. I'm tired of waiting. She bought a dress for the occasion. Emerald green. Custom designed. The kind of gown that made a statement before you even spoke. Her stylist did her hair in elegant waves. Makeup subtle but flawless. Diamond earrings, not the ones Elliot had given her, but ones she bought herself. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This wasn't the exhausted mother Elliot had abandoned. This was a woman who'd rebuilt herself from ash and emerged as fire. Rosa watched the triplets that night. They were excited about the fancy party, even though they wouldn't be attending. Mommy looks like a princess, Arya whispered. Mommy looks like a boss, Eliana corrected gently, kissing her daughter's forehead. The National Building Museum glittered like a jewel box when she arrived. Chandeliers. String quartet. Champagne fountains. Washington's elite in tuxedos and gowns. Networking and pretending their philanthropy was about something other than tax deductions. Eliana walked in alone. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, recognizing faces but not stopping. Not yet. Then she saw them. Lana and Elliot, standing near the main stage. Lana in red, always red, dripping in diamonds. Elliot beside her, looking less comfortable than he probably wanted to appear. He saw Eliana first. The champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. His face went white. Lana followed his gaze, and for the first time in her life, Eliana saw Lana Jones look uncertain. Eliana. Elliot's voice cracked across the space between them. The room went silent. Beautifully, perfectly silent. Eliana walked toward them slowly. Her heels clicked on marble floors. Each step deliberate. She stopped 3 feet away. Elliot. Lana. Her voice was calm. Conversational. Beautiful event. What are you doing here? Lana recovered first, her voice sharp. I was invited. As a potential investor. Eliana smiled. Though I should probably disclose, I already am one. I own 17 of your former properties. And as of last month, the Morrison building. Lana's face went slack with shock. That's not, you can't. I can. I did. Eliana turned to Elliot. You look well. How's that partnership working out? He couldn't speak. Just stared at her like she was a hallucination. People were gathering now. Sensing drama. Phones discreetly emerging. You must be wondering why I'm here, Eliana continued. Why I'd come to celebrate the company that employed the woman who destroyed my marriage. I didn't destroy anything, Lana hissed. He came to me. Because you offered him an escape from responsibility. Yes, I know. Narcissists are predictable like that. Eliana's voice never rose. Never wavered. You find broken men and convince them their brokenness is strength. She turned back to Elliot. You have 30 seconds to explain why you deserve even a single dollar from the woman you called worthless. Silence. Elliot's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Eliana, I made mistakes. 20 seconds. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to. 10 seconds. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry. Time's up. Eliana's voice cut through his stammering like a knife. Do you know what your children's favorite color is? He blinked. What? Micah likes blue. Arya likes purple. Josiah likes green. They're 4 years old now. Arya still has respiratory issues. Josiah is reading above grade level. Micah wants to be an astronaut. Tears were streaming down Elliot's face now. You don't get to cry. You don't get to be the victim. You left 3 babies, your babies, because they were inconvenient. You drained our accounts and walked away. She turned to address the room now, voice carrying to every corner. This man chose ambition over family. This woman, she gestured to Lana, built her company on stolen contracts and manipulated financial reports to attract investors. Lana's face went white. That's slander. It's fact. I have documentation. All of it. Every fraudulent report, every bribed inspector, every contract you won through illegal means. The room erupted in whispers. And then, perfectly timed, the doors opened. Federal agents. FBI badges gleaming. Led by a woman in a sharp suit who made eye contact with Eliana and nodded once. And when she finished speaking, Justice walked through the door. Drop Justice if you've been waiting for this moment. Comment below, because what happens next is the fall you've been waiting for. Lana Jones. The lead FBI agent's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Lana stood frozen, champagne glass still in her hand, her face a mask of disbelief transforming into rage. This is ridiculous. I don't know what she told you, but you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud federal contract bidding processes. The agent moved forward, badge extended. You have the right to remain silent. The champagne glass slipped from Lana's fingers. It shattered on the marble floor, a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence of Washington's elite watching their queen fall. This is a mistake, Lana said, but her voice had lost its power. I have lawyers. I have. Your lawyers are being contacted as we speak. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Ma'am, please don't resist. Elliot stumbled backward, nearly falling. Wait, I wasn't part of. A second agent approached him. Elliot Anderson? We need you to come with us for questioning regarding your knowledge of fraudulent contract practices at Sterling Group. I didn't know. His voice pitched high with panic. I swear, I didn't know what she was doing. Then you'll be free to go after questioning. The agent's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. Eliana stood perfectly still as chaos erupted around her. Guests scrambling for exits. Phones flashing. Reporters materializing from nowhere, always there when blood hit the water. Lana locked eyes with her as the agents led her away. You did this, she hissed. You destroyed everything. No, Eliana said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just provided the evidence. And she had. Months of careful documentation. Every falsified report Lana had filed. Every bribed inspector. Every manipulated bid. All of it handed over to federal investigators through her lawyer, with a complete paper trail that was impossible to deny. Eliana had learned from the best, after all. You don't just defeat your enemies, you let them defeat themselves while you watch. Elliot was crying now. Openly. Desperately. Eliana, please, tell them I didn't know. Tell them. She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No lingering love or hate. Just emptiness where he used to live in her heart. You made your choices, Elliot, she said softly. Now live with them. She turned and walked away. Behind her, reporters swarmed. Questions shouted. Cameras flashing. Ms. Myers. Ms. Myers. Did you orchestrate this? How long have you been investigating Sterling Group? What's your relationship to the defendants? Eliana didn't answer. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. She walked out of the National Building Museum with her head high and her conscience clear. Outside, the night air was cool. November in D.C., crisp and clean. She stood on the steps for a moment, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights, and finally, allowed herself to breathe. A real breath. Deep. Cleansing. It was over. The woman who destroyed her marriage was in handcuffs. The man who'd abandoned his family was facing the consequences of his choices. And Eliana Myers, the woman they both underestimated, stood free. A reporter caught up to her. Young woman, ambitious eyes, recorder extended. Ms. Myers, one question. Do you feel vindicated? Eliana paused. Considered. I feel free, she said simply. And then she got into her car, a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle she could easily afford, and drove home. Home to her 3 children. Home to the life she'd built from nothing. Home to herself. Rosa met her at the door, smiling. They're asleep. How was the party? Educational, Eliana said, slipping off her heels. She paid Rosa, thanked her, and then walked through her quiet house. Past the photos of her children. Past the awards on her wall. Past the blueprints spread on her dining room table for tomorrow's project. She checked on the triplets, all 3 sleeping peacefully, their faces angelic in the nightlight's glow. Micah clutching his stuffed astronaut. Arya with her purple blanket. Josiah with the engineering book he'd insisted on keeping in his bed. They were perfect. Whole. Untouched by the ugliness of what their parents had been. And that's what mattered. Eliana stood in their doorway, still wearing her emerald gown, and whispered, "You'll never know how close we came to losing everything. But you'll always know you were loved. That's my promise." She closed their door softly and returned to her own room. Took off the dress. Removed the diamonds. Washed away the makeup. And looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back had survived hell. Had built an empire from desperation. Had brought down the people who tried to destroy her. But more importantly, had raised 3 beautiful children alone and refused to let bitterness poison her soul. Once, he laughed while she cried. Now, the world applauded while she smiled. 6 months later, Eliana stood in her home office, watching the sun set over Washington, D.C. The city sprawled below her, thousands of lights beginning to flicker on as darkness fell. Each light representing a life, a story, struggle she'd never know. Lana Jones was serving 7 years in federal prison. Wire fraud. Securities fraud. A dozen other charges that ensured she wouldn't see freedom for a long time. Elliot had avoided prison, barely. Cooperated with investigators. Testified against Lana in exchange for immunity. But his reputation was destroyed. No firm would hire him. His name was poison in the industry. Last Eliana heard, he was working in insurance sales in Baltimore. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Just distance. He'd asked to see the children once. Through his lawyer. Formal request for supervised visitation. Eliana had let him. Not for his sake. For theirs. Micah, Arya, and Josiah met their father in a supervised facility with a social worker present. They'd been curious but cautious. This stranger who claimed to be their daddy. The visit lasted 45 minutes. Elliot cried the entire time. The children, confused by his emotion, had asked to leave early. He hadn't requested another visit. Maybe someday he would. Maybe someday they'd want to know him. But that was their choice to make, not hers. Eliana had done what she needed to do. She'd survived. She'd protected them. She'd built something meaningful. The rest was just life. Myers Consult Group continued expanding. The foundation had helped 200 single mothers pursue STEM careers. 3 of them now worked for her company. She'd been featured in Forbes. Engineering Weekly. The Washington Post had called her a visionary who's reshaping infrastructure design. But none of that felt as important as the triplets' laughter echoing through her house. Or the way Arya had hugged her this morning and said, "You're the best mommy in the whole world." That was success. Eliana turned away from the window and looked at the photo on her desk. Her children. 5 years old now. Healthy. Happy. Whole. She'd kept them safe when the world tried to break them. And in keeping them safe, she'd found herself. People asked her sometimes, in interviews, at conferences, during keynote speeches, how she did it. How she survived what should have destroyed her. The answer was complicated and simple simultaneously. You survive, she'd tell them, by deciding that you're worth more than what happened to you. By building something bigger than your pain. By choosing to be defined by what you create, not what was taken from you. Revenge had built her empire, yes. The anger had fueled her in those early days. The desire to prove Elliot wrong. To show Lana she couldn't be erased. To demonstrate that being abandoned didn't mean being destroyed. But revenge alone would have left her hollow. It was forgiveness that built her peace. Not forgiveness for Elliot or Lana. They'd have to live with their choices. But forgiveness for herself. For not seeing the signs sooner. For believing she needed someone else to be complete. For all the moments she'd felt worthless and believed it. She'd forgiven that version of herself. Released her. Let her go. And in that release found something extraordinary. Freedom. Mommy. Aria's small voice came from the doorway. Eliana turned. Her daughter stood there in princess pajamas, clutching her purple blanket. Can't sleep, baby? I had a dream. You were flying. With big wings. Eliana smiled, crossing the room to scoop her daughter up. Flying, huh? Where was I going? Nowhere, Aria said seriously. You were already home. You just had wings anyway. Out of the mouths of children. Eliana carried her daughter back to bed, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. I love you, sweet girl. Love you too, Mommy. To the moon and back and around the stars. She watched Aria drift back to sleep, then returned to her office one last time. The city lights glittered below. Endless. Infinite. Somewhere out there, Elliot was living with his regrets. Somewhere, Lana was counting the years until freedom. But here, in this house with these children, with this life she built from absolute devastation, Eliana Myers was exactly where she belonged. She'd been broken. She'd been abandoned. She'd been told she was worthless. And she'd proven that brokenness could be rebuilt into something stronger than what existed before. That abandonment could lead to self-discovery. That worth was inherent, not assigned by others. The story could have ended differently. She could have given up. Could have let the betrayal destroy her. Could have let anger poison her into something ugly. But she chose differently. Chose to build. Chose to rise. Chose to transform pain into purpose. And in that choosing, she'd written her own ending. Not the one Elliot imagined for her. Not the one Lana expected. But the one she deserved. Eliana Myers turned off her office light and walked toward her bedroom, pausing once more to look in on her sleeping children. 3 miracles. 3 reasons. 3 lives that proved love was stronger than abandonment. She closed their door softly and whispered into the quiet darkness. Thank you for leaving. I never would have found myself if you'd stayed. And somewhere in that silence, she finally became free.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.